Welcome, initiates. Today's Akashic word is sleep. Now, you might think that's a very simple word and that it's nowhere near as complicated as so many of the words that we've tried to tackle before. But let me tell you, this is probably the most important talk that we're going to give in this series. Even explaining the Akashic Chronicles and the Akashic Records are not as important as what we're about to say today. Now, being a good anthroposophist initiate who knows all of these things, you may think, oh, that's so simple, I'll just tune out. But before we're over today, we're going to reveal some secrets that actually take Rudolf Steiner's work one more step in the right direction, because we know from his indications certain things, and so it's obvious as we're revealing the true nature of sleep that we're going to get into some areas that are fantastic mysteries. And that's why the 52-page document that is in the description box below, called The Mysteries of Sleep and Dreams, will basically be something for everyone, whether you are an aspirant or an initiate. But if you are a materialist, this is also for you, because it explains to you what's happening in the realm of dreams. Now, years ago, I studied dreams quite thoroughly. I was so amazed at what was happening in my dreams. I tried to figure out what's going on. And just like most of the things in my youth, I found out that most people aren't having experiences like that. But as I looked at it, I was able to see that there were certain segments that were contacting certain parts of my own physiology, contacting certain beings, going to certain places, and coming back, basically, which in the condition which everyone who is an aspirant or an initiate should want, which is a healthy night's sleep with no nightmares, with nothing bothering you, but occasionally a message from the spiritual world. And that message can appear as images, as sounds, or as speech, as the creative word. And we're going to get into those three different stages. But I was so amazed because when I first found out about rapid eye movement and that this was the big key to basic modern science's understanding of sleep, and also when I did the research on brain waves, trying to figure out a way to have the highest brain wave that coheres all the others together, which then creates a state of super learning. So then the question was for me, does that condition happen in sleep of super learning when all of the brain waves are synchronized? Well, in the article, we tell you what science knows about it and the different stages. The reality is science knows almost nothing about what happens to you when you go to sleep. They have no idea. They have many, many drugs that can help you with sleeplessness. There's many drugs that they can put you to sleep. But again, some sleeping pills cause birth defects, like thalidomide. So when it comes down to science, I wouldn't trust science one lick when it comes to the realm of the unseen, the realm of the mysteries of sleep and dreams. Because why? Because they're materialists. They don't have dreams. And the reason they don't have dreams is because they don't have a longing for the spirit. And if you don't have a longing for the spirit, and if you don't have a relationship to the solar deity, Christ, who works through the realm of the Elohim, also the Dynamis and the Karyotetes, then you can't get through the second realm, which they call there's N1, N2, and N3, according to them. N means non-rapid eye movement. I'll explain these things in a second. But basically, these three realms that they come up with, N1, N2, N3, those are the exact same realms that Rudolf Steiner describes as the states of consciousness of dreaming, dreamless sleep, and trance consciousness. And of course, we all know that right here, we do have waking consciousness in the waking world. As a matter of fact, the materialistic science basically would say that's where it ends. And anything else that comes out of your dreams, well, that's not waking consciousness. That's not thinking. That's just some kind of biological reaction that you should ignore. It's kind of like the people who have near-death experiences and they say they go through a tunnel towards light. Scientists now will tell you that's just an optical condition on the in the optic nerve that happens, and it's not really real. And those people really don't meet their relatives and the people who've died once they go through the tunnel of light and go into this death realm, or the realm after life, we should call it. So what do they have? They have basically nothing. Now here's what the scientists will tell you. They'll tell you that when you go to sleep, so we'll start here with the scientific view right here. There it is, a bunch of numbers, a bunch of letters that no one would know what they even mean. But when you fall asleep, you leave the waking realm, according to them, and you go into basically something that they can't define. They have no idea what it is. But they would say, and they're quite incorrect about this, that there is a state called falling asleep, and that in that state, and that's why I put rapid eye movement, the REM state, here, because they don't understand that falling asleep state is a REM state. Then that means that there's a REM state between N1, N2, and N3. Matter of fact, it's all REM, N1, REM, N2, REM, N3, REM, and it goes back to waking. What happens in N1, N2, N3? They don't have a clue. They can tell you what the brain waves are doing. They can tell you how the neurological patterns in your brain are moving from one section of your brain to another. But essentially, they cannot give you any help about the psychological or the soul or the spiritual relationship to these states of consciousness, because they are states of consciousness. We just need to understand them and learn how to wake up in those states. Rudolf Steiner said that the initiate, well, I'm paraphrasing for sure, it's a very long quote, but he basically says that the initiate doesn't really sleep much at night for knowing of the suffering of the world. Rudolf Steiner was said to have slept about 4 hours a night because he was constantly working for others, for the world. So for him, he tells us when we're talking about the process of initiation that your dreams will change. They'll change as you evolve. But if we talk today about what this system is, you can take that into your own control. As a matter of fact, everything that I've been saying in our books or in these talks is right here. You don't need a guru, a teacher, a religion, a priest, or anything else. All you need to do is understand these realms right here. Because if you do, then you will move from being an aspirant, someone who aspires to understand spiritual science, to an initiate of spiritual science, at which point these conditions, these states turn into something completely different, which we'll go into here in a minute. For an initiate, it's a completely different experience. And that is because Rudolf Steiner tells us how to shorten the REM states. Now the REM states, the rapid eye movement states, according to science, are the only time that we dream. And when we wake up, well, and first when we go to sleep, falling asleep, and then during these other stages, and then right before we wake up, we go into a REM state, rapid eye movement state. And those states, they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand what the eyes are doing, but the eyes are moving rapidly all around as if they're looking at something. Well, many, many years ago, when I started my research into this, I was so excited because they didn't have N1, N2, N3. They just had found out about rapid eye movement, and then they knew about this state, which is also called slow wave state, which means that you're basically in a trance. You're in a unconscious, subconscious, even collective conscious state in this trance. So I put that over here, subconscious, unconscious, and Rudolf Steiner refers to it as the unconscious states, these states here, dreaming, dreamless, sleep, and trance. But he also points out that that is where the group souls live, and of course, because the group souls live there, that is also where the elemental kingdoms, oops, I forgot to add an L here, elemental kingdoms also exist. Kingdom 1, 2, and 3. That gets very complicated, and I really don't want to go into that today, but essentially that is happening at the same time these things are happening if you were awake, if you were an initiate, awake in these conditions. And Rudolf Steiner said that the real mission is to bring wakefulness into your sleep and dreaming into your wakefulness. Now, that's because if you're a true initiate, your wakeful condition your dreaming state is a transformation of your thinking in the daytime. But for an initiate, the dreaming state is where they meet angels, your spirit self, through moral imagination. And they are images. And Rudolf Steiner describes that first stage that we go into, the dreaming stage, but let me describe rapid eye movement. Rudolf Steiner pointed out that if, before you go to bed, you say your prayers, and then you do what he calls Rückschau, or review the day backwards from the point of view of those that you encountered. In other words, going backwards, and the reason you go backwards is because you're looking at your etheric body, physical, etheric, and astral body. I should have written that in here. But when you're going backwards in time, you're actually looking at the etheric body. So what you're trying to do is look at the images that have been imprinted in your etheric body concerning what it is that you did in that day, what you thought, what you felt, and what you did. And if you can do that, then you have saved the time in the spiritual world for your eyes. And the studies many years ago, decades ago, 3 decades ago, they took people and they measured the muscle eye movements, and they found that whatever they were doing right before they went to sleep, the eyes replicated the exact motion of what they were looking at. And so they started to do experiments, and they said, well, let's have them look right before they go to sleep at really tall trees in a forest where they have to tilt their head back. Let's have them look all around. Let's have them look at something moving by rapidly, watching horses in a race. And then they measured that, and then they clocked it against basically the muscular decompression and integration of these deeds, feelings, and thoughts. And they noticed that the eye replicated the exact motions that it made in the physical world, looking at the things that it looked at, but in a reverse order. Now, this would seem confusing to some, and that's the reason the scientists have never noticed this. But then again, scientists don't notice that in dreaming, you're upside down. And the reason is because your optic nerve shows you everything neurologically upside down. And so if you want to see the true image, you'd have to look at it upside down. We convert that into being right side up in our nerves, and that's because of the optic nerve crossing right before the corporal quadrigemini, and then that impulse becoming split. But anyway, the point is that we, in thinking, and as soon as we go into the dreaming world, we're upside down. When you can go into a dreamless state where you're having no dreams at all, you're actually moving backward in time in your etheric body to review your emotions and the images of the day. And then in this trance condition, we're actually experiencing the world inside out. That's the reason we don't remember dreams from this deep dream state, or slow wave state they call it, or N3. And so what we're trying to do is awaken enough in these conditions of consciousness that we can remember what it is that is happening in those realms. But to do so, this is what you must do. Not only the Rückschau and review your day backwards so that you're actually looking at the karma that you created for yourself, good or ill, or neutral. So you, before you go to sleep, if you go backwards in the day and you see it all and you relive it all and you go all the way back to when you woke up, you have done the work for the spiritual world, because our bodies are not controlled by us. They're controlled by all kinds of beings, the 9 hierarchies. And so when we can do this work for them, it's the shortcut so that you can wake up even as you're falling asleep. Now, in the ancient days, it was told that if you could stay awake, sometimes they'd say 3 days, sometimes they'd say 7, sometimes they'd say 9 days. But if you can stay awake for X number of days, then that was part of initiation. It was preparing you to understand how to separate your astral body from your etheric body. And in the etheric body, we have the most magical world that there possibly is. If I describe it to you, it sounds as if I'm speaking gibberish. But your etheric body carries all of your thinking capacities from before birth into life. It actually knows who you're going to be in the future. It has it all planned out, because the energy body of the etheric is the life body that restores the fact that in sleep, Rudolf Steiner would say that the physical and etheric, that's where you, actually the ego here is what you're going to do at night. Your ego and your astral body. Supposedly, not supposedly, they do, but they go out in all directions, we should say, at night. They expand in all directions. And lying in the bed is your etheric and your physical. For you anthroposophists who are gone altogether beyond, it may be quite surprising for you to remember that Rudolf Steiner said many times that we don't just start here in the earth at night and expand out to the realm of the moon in the first stage, the realm of Venus in the second stage, the realm of Mercury in the third stage. In the fourth stage, we go around the sun. We go around the sun a second time and a third time. And then we go to the realm of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and then the ring of stars, the zodiac. All the stars out there. And remember, according to science, modern, materialistic, secular, superstitious science, they will tell you that every speck of mineral in you comes from a star, usually from afar, and that it came a long, long time ago down here, transformed through our sun and our star, our local sun, and then came into basically accretion, basically condensation into this material world. So basically we are stars. Our substance of our body are stars. So when I say the zodiac, you might think, oh, that's so far out, it's billions of light years away. But no, it's not. It's as close as you can possibly imagine. And this picture isn't quite accurate, and Steiner will tell you this, and I give you the quotes in the article in the description below. Now, what really happens is there's a replica of this made in your body. Now, the anthroposophists would say, what are you talking about? Well, if you do not read The Human Heart by Rudolf Steiner, you cannot understand this. And there's only one other place, and that's when he describes the etheric heart. Rudolf Steiner says that the child, when they come into the world, they're mostly head. And the head is a picture of the cosmos. And it's the perfect, it's already perfected. It's a sphere. That's what we'll become. Our whole body will become a sphere in the future. But the head is perfect, the most perfect part of us. And that child is coming into the head, comes down, gets stuck around 9, 10 years old. That's why they have the 9, 10-year-old change in the throat. And then comes down into the breast, into the heart, and literally impresses an etheric replica of the stars and the sun and the planets into the heart. As a matter of fact, that's the first heart of the child. It's a cosmic heart, and it is a perfect replica of the cosmos. And after 7 years, it dissolves and is replaced, and that's kind of the hereditary heart, and then it's replaced by another one, and then at age, when the astral body comes in, it's replaced then by another astral heart, and that astral heart that imprints your entire karma into that, what he calls this box in the heart, the cube in the heart, then carries your karma. Well, think about that. That then rises up, and this is the part that's most interesting to me. Rudolf Steiner talks about the etherization of the blood and the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream. Well, that comes up from the metabolic system through the spine, up to the heart, and then all the way up to the midbrain, and then the cranial nerves join, and they then go into what's called the corpus quadragemini, which is a cube inside of the head. On top of that cube is a tetrahedron, which is the pineal gland. And of course, it is inside of a sphere. Note I'm pointing at the Platonic solids. What we're talking about is the Platonic solids can all be found in the head except for the octahedron. The dodecahedron right now, that is what the heart is turning into. A 6-sided cube turns into a 12-sided dodecahedron and goes up to the brain and becomes what's called the etheric heart. Now, the etheric heart is referred to by Rudolf Steiner as the human willpower coming up out of the metabolic system, going through the rhythmic system of the heart, and then going all the way to the head. And when that happens, that's one direction, because it goes all the way through the corpus quadragemini, and it goes up to the pineal gland. And there, this whole process happens in the midbrain, between the pineal and the pituitary, with the first and second ventricles adding to the third ventricle. And Rudolf Steiner literally says that's the holy grail in the brain. So the head itself is not only a picture of the cosmos, it is, according to Rudolf Steiner, the Grail Castle. And the Grail Castle actually happens in between the tetrahedron of the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. And when that happens, you have literally a manifestation that is purely magical. So when the willpower comes into thinking, it can transform the cube of the heart into the dodecahedron of the etheric heart. Now, you might say, why is the etheric heart back here near the lambdoid suture, or the lambda point, back here at what would be called the hindbrain, the reptilian brain, the third part of the brain, which controls willpower? Well, that always mystified me, but now I'm fairly certain that what Rudolf Steiner was saying, if you take all of his indications from different places and you put them together, is that this is the transformation of the heart into the etheric heart. Now, the reason I believe this is true is because when I started studying with the Tibetan Lamas, I could always see that every single one of them would do the same thing when they went into a ritual, which was memorized. And remember, all their rituals are they're sung. They have images, and they have three-dimensional representations for them. So any kind of empowerment or ritual has imagination, inspiration, intuition. Images, the imaginal world. Inspiration, the world of sound and the harmony of the spheres, and intuition, the creative word. And that's what you get, as well as all the other elements of the ritual that they add to make sure the whole 12 senses are recognized. Well, the dodecahedron has 12 sides. It also, like the zodiac in these 12 sides, is represented by cosmologists as saying that the shape of the entire universe is a dodecahedron. Now, you've probably heard me say this before in the cosmological talks. You can go look this up. For a while, it was the most accepted theory of the shape of the cosmos. But the strange thing is this. The dodecahedron somehow starts in the middle, goes out to the edges, and when it reaches the terminal edges of the 12 pentagons that are the 12 surfaces of the dodecahedron, all of a sudden, magically, they jump back to the middle. Now, they do the same thing with what they call the horn theory of the cosmos, that it's a horn, and it blows this stuff out, and then when it gets to the end, it turns back and comes back on itself and starts at the beginning again. And some call it Gabriel's horn, of course. Well, they have a lot of theories about the shape of the cosmos, but my point is the shape of the cosmos, which is then, Rudolf Steiner says that when you leave at night and your astral and ego go out and expand in all directions through these spheres, reach the zodiac. This is like standing on the rings of Saturn, looking at the zodiac, he says, and then you turn around and you come back. Well, he says you actually don't go all the way out there in this physical space of what we would know as Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. We don't, even an initiate during life doesn't go all the way out there. During death, they do, because the same world that you go into in these 3 realms, it's actually 9 realms, but we in dreams experience it as 3 realms. So as you go through these realms after death, those are the same realms an initiate goes to every night during sleep. So speaking about the etheric heart, I first must point out the octahedron is found in the auricle of the ear. Those little crystals that determine your balance and actually help you hear, they're now finding out that they're magical, and they are replicating them, and it's being able to help people hear. So in the tetrahedron is the pineal gland is in an aqueduct. And until it stands up, it doesn't function properly. So the first thing has to be that you wake up that you have the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream, the etherization of the blood, wakes up the pineal gland as you deposit calcium carbonate crystals in your pineal gland. So that's the first stage. Then in the cube, well, that's where the 11 cranial nerves come, and all the nerves are basically processed there except for the vagus nerve. And then in the octahedron, that's where we hear. And that also is directly connected. The nerves are connected to the corpus quadragemini, which is the cube. That's the cube. And then hearing. And then what happens with the dodecahedron? When you bring willpower, which is intuition. So you have imagination, inspiration, and intuition. And I believe that the dodecahedron is a representation of what happens when you have the 12 world views balanced in yourself, and you're the one in the middle, the 13th point of view, which is the same as the zodiac. If you are still acting out of one aspect of the zodiac, then you still have more to develop. Every person should have a relationship to all aspects of the zodiac, and that's also true for the planets that are found in those zodiacal signs. And that's why so many of us are told that astrology has something to do, especially with the solar influence, but they forget that it's also the planetary influences that are just as profound. So it isn't just the zodiacal signs, it is the planets acting in them. And once that happens, then you have the will coming into thinking. And I believe that's how the etherization of the blood can help the heart, which, by the way, doesn't come up the back spinal cord. It comes up what Rudolf Steiner calls the frontal spinal cord. It comes up what Rudolf Steiner calls the frontal spinal cord. And that's a huge difference, and that's little understood. But the vagus nerve splits into two at the heart, and one goes through the part of the heart that causes it to contract, and the other one goes through the part of the heart that causes the heart to expand. And then it goes on up, right up to the medulla oblongata and the midbrain, and it doesn't go through the corpus quadragemini. It's completely different. So there's another form of neural analysis, because the vagus nerve not only goes through these major chakras from the heart to the head, but it goes all the way down into all aspects of the metabolic system, all your organs and all the metabolic system. So the vagus nerve is like another spinal cord, but it has to be consciously developed from the heart to the head. And that's the trick. That's the etherization of the blood. That's what creates the etheric heart rising into this lambda point, or the lambdoid suture, which is at the back of the head. And by suture, it means the places, and it makes a pattern like this. It's the places that the skull bones come together and knit together. And when you look at them, they're knit together in the most amazing way. And so I believe that eventually the last of the Platonic solids, the icosahedron, will be found when we truly understand what it is that is happening in the brain. And then we'll find those terminal points can probably be related to the midbrain, and that the terminal points of the dodecahedron can probably be associated with the bones in the skull. Now, that's just an aside. Let's go back. Sleep is the little sister of death. For an initiate, after death, if you can be conscious of all of your karma and also the elements of reincarnation that you can learn from being awake, karma and reincarnation. Yes, see? In the first stage, Steiner says we're like babies who are philosophers in the first stage of sleep, called dreaming. And he says that as we go into that first stage, it's like being in an ocean of waves, and we're one wave, but we can't control anything. It's moving us around, and it's scaring us. As a matter of fact, it starts to develop anxiety. And he says the only thing that's going to get you through that first stage, which they call N1, and he calls dreaming, which is a transformation of thinking, is, and it affects the nerve sense system. It is, as a matter of fact, a digestion of the nerve sense aspects. You're a baby. You're a philosopher there because you're moving into the divine world and you know little about it. Now, if you're an initiate, you might know much more about it. But when you enter this realm, you're drowning. You cannot control your willpower once you cross this threshold between waking and these states of sleep, you can't control that. Your willpower is not under your control. That's why you can't control your dreams. Not even an initiate can control their dreams. Dreams are a digestion of what you did in the day. Rudolf Steiner says, sleep is the great educator. And that when you go into sleep, initiates, I'm so happy to tell you, it's the best practice you have for going into the spiritual world. It's the best practice you have for mitigating your karma through repeated human incarnations, or what we would call reincarnation. Why? Because in these states, you are actually talking to angels, archangels, and archai. But even more so, as you've noticed, if you keep expanding out and you go into these other realms, then you're talking to the exousiai, the dunamis, and the karyotetes, which is the realm of Christ, the realm of the solar influence. He specifically works through the exousiai, also called the Elohim. And we have to go through that realm 3 times over, because why? There's 3 hierarchy in that second rank of the hierarchy. In the first, between Earth and Moon, Venus, Mercury, we're going through the lower 3rd rank of the hierarchy, angels, archangels, and archai. But if you are truly awake, and most materialists cannot make it past even the realm of the earth, they can't even get to the realm of the moon. Generally, there's considered 28 steps, and many materialists don't take the first step. As a matter of fact, Rudolf Steiner points out that in that realm of dreaming, or in the realm of sleep, Ahriman, the being, the father of lies, the being of materialism, enters into the materialist sleep and actually steals their soul. And after they die, they have nothing to give to the spiritual world in any of these realms. If you had moral thinking, you could give it to the realm between the earth and moon. If you had moral feeling, you could give it, which is imagination. If you had moral feeling, you could give it to the realm of Venus, which is the archangels, through inspiration. So if you have moral imaginations or moral inspiration during the day, it feeds the angels, the archangels. And if you have a moral action, it feeds the archai. And if you feed them, it's a symbiotic relationship. They feed you. You feed them moral thoughts, feelings, and will, which are called moral imagination, moral inspiration, moral intuition. That directly feeds this lower hierarchy. But also, if you were a true initiate, even in sleep, you would expand out, even if it's in the etheric heart, which is, like we said, this cosmos that's been imprinted into the human heart, rose up into the head, filled with will, rises up into thinking so that you can now directly access it in waking consciousness, then you would contact the beings of the thrones in the realm of Mars, the beings of the cherubim in the realm of Jupiter, and the beings of seraphim, the beings of love in Saturn. And then when you looked out upon the stars from the ring of Saturn, looking out upon the stars, you would say, "Ah, Father God, you are the ground of existence." Now, isn't that the opposite of what a materialist would say if they were standing on the rings of Saturn looking at the stars? They'd say, "I am nothing. I'm a piece of dust. This is a world of entropy that's all going to die. I'm going to a cold, dead, dark grave," right? That's what they say if they actually got out there. That's why they're not conscious when they get there. They have no gifts, no food to feed the hierarchy. They have no love, harmony. They have no moral willpower. So they give nothing to the spiritual world, so they get nothing, and that pushes your evolution as a materialist back into the realm of animals. Now, you might immediately think, well, but I'm an initiate, and I don't have dreams. Well, you're not supposed to have dreams, okay? Not at certain levels. So I can't tell you, and there isn't a path of 1, 2, 3, what happens as you're an initiate. You can start off by going to the realm of intuition before you ever develop moral imagination. Maybe you don't even know you have moral imagination, but you do deeds of love, you're going to get gifts from these higher hierarchies. And so, as I always say, if you have a pure heart, that's it. That's all you have to do. But if you have a big brain, and you're one of these cosmologists that Rudolf Steiner said would incarnate now, you'd use anthroposophy to figure it all out so that later you could say, I knew I should have faith in the divine. As a matter of fact, you won't get through drowning in this first stage without longing for the divine. If you don't long for the divine in that stage, you will drown. You will have no consciousness. You will come back with no dreams. But in that stage, if you start to have a longing for the divine, absolutely a non-stop longing for the divine, you'll rise up out of that water. You still won't get to control your willpower, but you'll find that as you're feeding these beings, the Holy Spirit or angels, that they're going to feed you. And so when you go all the way out and you come all the way back, as you go out, you give the gifts. As you come back, you gain the gifts. And so when you wake up in the morning, if you really had a true spiritual experience as an initiate, you would have heard someone speaking to you in a place that gave you an inspiration that will last the rest of your life and filled in millions of pictures of moral imagination of how that might manifest. And if you do not have that, then you did not contact the realm of the seraphim, because they're a realm of perfect love and harmony and divine moral willpower. You have to go through those stages to reach them. So if you do go into your nightly sleep and you wake up with beautiful dreams where you are in the Akashic records, the Hall of Wisdom, the Temple of Sophia, Pan Sophia, there's 10,000 names for this, Tushita Heaven, Mount Meru, all the ones that I am mentioning all the time. It's the same place. And where is it? It's climbing up to where? To the dodecahedron in your head, above the sphere of the bone of your head, above the tetrahedron of your pineal gland, which is your crown chakra, above the corpus quadragemini, the cube, which is also divided into multiple sections, so it's much more complicated. As a matter of fact, I'm anticipating that we can probably, if I had a good person who was an expert in geometry, we could probably find the icosahedron on the inside of that divided corpus quadragemini, more than likely. But anyway, in the octahedron we find these crystals for sound, and with the dodecahedron we have the entire cosmos. So when you rise out to that realm of the rings of Saturn, the ring past not, more than likely, as Rudolf Steiner is pointing out, you have, and literally in the translations they say facsimile, a replica, a model of the entire divine living cosmos, not an image of it, but a replica of it. And as I've always said, Rudolf Steiner pointed out that everything in the cosmos is in your human body. Your body is the temple of the cosmos. You are the microcosm of the macrocosm. As above, so below. That's what we're talking about here. So this may seem as if it's the simplest thing, and you've heard me say it numerous times in cosmological talks. But now we're talking about what is the psychological experience of the person going into these realms, both just in sleep as an aspirant and through initiation as an initiate of spiritual science. And that is a completely different thing. Oh, look again. See, I do this just to make sure everybody's awake. Human needs an N. And by the way, this is not a mistake, so we'll just mark through that. All right, so what's going on here?
Well, then erase it, Doug.
No, okay. Well, all right, if you want to take that section out.
That's what I kept thinking. Why does he think that's wrong?
I like for stand up and let people see. Why? Why? Because I thought it was icosahedron. Sorry. Okay. So, human. I had to make sure that you got spirit human. Also, Steiner calls it spirit man. Now, what are these things? What is, for an initiate, when the human being goes into dreaming, the initiate has a moral imagination, takes it into the spiritual world. Well, what kind of dream do you think they're going to get out of that? They're going to get the divine, beautiful dream of what they would image as an angel. So literally, if you can take into your own spirit self, these are the three aspects of your spirit body. We really don't have control of them yet. They are being helped by our guardian angel, archangels, and archi to help us understand our thinking, feeling, and willing. But the will is so little understood that that's why we have hypnosis. And you get into the collective unconscious or the subconscious, or as Rudolf Steiner says, the whole sleep realm is the realm of subconscious. That means that you have capacities that you don't know about that are in you that can be tapped into by going into a condition where you cross the threshold And if you are crossing the threshold and you're having dreams and you're contacting moral imagination and your angels, many people think that that is the highest level of channeling of the spiritual world. That's the first level. And for the aspirant, it will come up as dreams, and what will usually happen is your fear, your doubt, your hatred. Well, actually, it's your doubt. This is doubt, that's fear, that's hatred, and on the negative side. So if you try to go into the spiritual world with doubt, then you're not going to get very far. You give them nothing, and they're going to give you nothing, and you come back with nothing. I know people who've never had a dream in their whole life. Told them to take I gave them a little tiny double terminated crystal this big, put it near their pillow. The person was colorblind, never had a dream in his life, and he told me I was an idiot. Well, long story short, he had his first dream. It was in full living color. He was flying around and doing all this stuff. He brought the crystal back and said, I never want to have another dream in my whole life. That's a materialist, okay? Because they don't long for the divine. They don't believe in the divine. So how are they going to communicate with the divine? With images. And in the etheric body, it's flowing images. It's the imaginal world. It's images, living images. But in the spiritual world, they're all true and moral, and they're eternal. Down here, we have images, and they're just, silliness. Okay, so for the initiate, as soon as they go to sleep, they're not going to, falling asleep, well, first they do the rukshow. They understand the karma and reincarnation of the day, and they're not a baby philosopher. They're a very deep philosopher. They go to sleep and they start talking to angels through their spirit self. And then when they listen carefully in this into realm, after going through, because look, when you fall asleep, you're going to have a lot of rapid eye movement about what you did that day, just in general. Then you're going to have your thoughts of that day. Then you're going to have the rapid eye movement of looking at your thoughts for that day. Then you're going to have into, which is your realm of feeling, and it's, it's complicated because the first one's upside down, the second one's backwards, the third one's inside out. So you're in two. You're trying to digest the feelings of the day, and then you go into a REM state that then gives you your eye movements as if you are doing something. Now, that's those strange dreams that you get where you go, I don't know what any of that means. Who are these people? Why are people coming out of my past, jumping my dreams, and then I have no idea what any of that chaotic nonsense meant? It's supposed to be. Until you become an initiate and you can control what it is you take into that spiritual realm, because it's incredibly reactive. The ever-present help of the spiritual world, Rudolf Steiner calls it. They never sleep. We're little tiny baby philosophers. We have to sleep 1/3 or more of the time. And Rudolf Steiner points out, and I have the quotes there in the article, that says that what you do in the digestive process at night with these hierarchical beings, in other words, understanding your karma and your reincarnation and why your destiny is what it is, that's all we remember after we die. So after we die, we go into a spiritual world. The only thing we remember is not all this materialistic delusion and illusion. It's what we actually remembered from our dreams and impressed into our etheric body during sleep or during deep, deep meditation, spiritual practices, spiritual rituals, or however else someone might get across the threshold. But if you get across the threshold, you need to do it with your waking consciousness if you're an initiate. Otherwise, what will happen? You could get into the realm of trance. Well, there's lots of people who can go into trance and do automatic writing. They can have ectoplasm flow out of their body and take a shape of a dead person. They can supposedly talk to they're really the astral shells, but they can supposedly talk to dead people. Now, that's all nonsense. But those powers are very real. We're all connected at this level of trance consciousness, because the subconscious, the group souls, the collective unconscious, the elemental kingdoms are all there. They're active, and we have access to them. How many people can do that? Very few. Rudolf Steiner was a clairvoyant who did not go into a trance. He went into these realms consciously. Now, in my very checkered life, colorful life. I have met many psychics, some of the best around, and you can always tell which realm they're working out of. If they're working out of a trance state, just look at them when they start speaking. And usually it's something they've done in their metabolic system, like drink coffee or massive amounts of sugar, that put them into that condition. Matter of fact, they can't go into that condition sometimes without the chemicals. In the ancient past, they'd put you into a mystery sleep in a mystery initiation temple, and they would make you go into a trance by giving you a substance that almost kills you. And then for 3 days, you're there and you're awake because of the type of substance they gave you. Will drugs, psychotropic drugs, take you into these realms? Yes, they will. They'll take you into the first realm of imaginal images. If you don't have morality, if you don't have longing for the divine, it's just going to look like a bunch of crazy psychotic cartoons. And it will actually scare you. Matter of fact, in the first stage, if you're not an initiate, you're going to meet the abyss right here. So after the first stage, if you can get through not drowning, most people then, if they feel as they're drowning in an ocean, they are not conscious in the second stage. And by the way, the third stage is the one that gives you your growth hormones and causes your body to regenerate. And if you wake someone from that state, it takes them about 20 minutes for their brain waves to shift so that they are even with you. That's why there's sleepwalking. That's why there's hallucinations and all these things that happen at night. Because they are in a trance and they haven't got past the drowning stage and the abyss. To cross the abyss, the only way you can do it is to have the love of Christ in your heart. That sounds as if it's extremely religious. Let me explain that. You can only come to a conscious experience of the double paradox of the Holy Trinity and understand Christ's love as a solar deity who came down to earth to save the earth and turn the earth into a star if you have a direct relationship with that etheric being now, not the Christ that was crucified. We're talking about the living Christ in the etheric realm. And you will meet that being every single night when you go to sleep, but we don't remember it. Why? He is the Lord of karma. He is the guardian of the threshold. You are not able to be conscious in his realm. Therefore, you have to go unconscious because it would overwhelm you if you were conscious in that realm. But if you had a relationship to Christ, which means to all other people on the earth through love, Christ is about loving others, right? It's not even about loving yourself. It's about loving God and loving yourself like you love God and loving others. So if you can do that and you have a relationship with Christ, you can cross the abyss in the second realm, into. And then in the third realm, if you can remember your life before birth and your life after death, which means reincarnation, and by the way, the life before birth gives you all of your capacities, your thinking capacities, your previous willpower in a prior incarnation becomes your head. It's the willpower, your limbs, what you did in a previous incarnation. I know this thing makes it look like I'm using a sword, sorry. But if you've done good things, then basically your head is going to be beautiful. Your teeth are going to be straight and your ears are going to be balanced between thinking, feeling, and willing in your ear. Your eyes will reflect it, your face will reflect it, and your whole head tells the initiate who you are. And then when they look in your heart, they can see those eternal drops. They can look in your head and they can see the calcium carbonate crystals. And they can look at the back of your head and see the etheric heart. And then they know if you have been awake in these realms. Because why? You have angels, archangels, and archai in your bodies. And they can be seen by an initiate. So, if you don't understand life before birth, okay, which is the pre-birth state is the state that gives you your capacity for thinking and higher thinking, higher feeling, higher willing. That all comes from the pre-birth state. And then after death, once you get out to the ring past not Saturn, you've given everything that your whole life had into those 9 realms. Then you get to turn around and come back, and then you're going to start building your body. Because the realm of sleep and the realm of death are the same realms. Same thing at night. If you've given to the spiritual beings, you come back feeling refreshed, with life, with inspiration, with the courage to do that inspiration, right? And basically, you're fired up with love. Same thing would happen if you're an initiate and you go out through the 9 realms and you give everything back you give to the spiritual beings everything that you did while you were on the earth. They are then going to build you a nice body. But that is not, there's always, if you want to correct me, you could always correct me, because there's a relative and an absolute view of anything. And if I told you the relative or the absolute without the other, you could always say, well, how about that other side of it? And so, yes, you don't get now the body that your karma could build for you, because the bodies have been so damaged, attacked, depleted, and because all the spiritual beings are, as much as possible, cleared out of the spiritual world and in the physical world. And so many people get bodies that just really don't reflect their karma, and tremendous suffering. But you see, if you only think about karma from a past point of view, it's things you did in the past, then you can't possibly understand what I'm talking about. Numerous initiates I know in this incarnation got bodies that were not suited to them, and they cannot complete their mission. The same thing happened around Rudolf Steiner with Carl Julius Schuré. He couldn't do his mission of teaching karma, so Rudolf Steiner had to take it up. And basically, that's the same thing going on now. Christ is the Lord of karma. He's the guardian of the threshold, and he mitigates catastrophes. He mitigates karma that doesn't seem to be correct. So if an initiate gets a body that actually fails them, they die early, or it's filled with tumors or whatever, that's not their karma. That is karma of the future that has to be mitigated by the Lord of karma. So, as you can see here, the baby philosopher uses the nerve sense system, the brain, the spinal cord, what we would call the outer layer of the chakras. And then on the second stage, you understand karma. Through Christ, you understand what you do to people and what's going to come of it, whether it's going to be good, neutral, or bad karma. That's what Christ is there to do. And so you can find that in your blood and respiration. In our talks on the heart, we've demonstrated to you that the heart knows everything. It knows everything. And the box that surrounds the heart, and then the heart that's the cube that holds the mysteries of the heart. And that is the blood and respiration, of course. And then respiration, yeah, spelled it right. So in the pulse of your blood and heart and your breath, of course, we know that that is where spirit comes in. Spirit comes in through respiration and blood, and that's also fire. And so in this realm, if you don't understand what you're seeing, you're going to think it's a fiery abyss that's going to eat you up. You're going to be falling into the pit of hell. Why? Because you didn't love people, and you don't care about the spiritual world, and you don't believe in reincarnation, so therefore you don't believe that there's any karma that's going to cause you any need to be nice to people so that you can actually have a reincarnation that will be somewhat pleasant, even though, again, it's not necessarily true for an initiate. Initiates suffer tremendously. But if you were an initiate and you had developed yourself so much in the wakeful day, in the waking day, that you could go across to these different realms, N1, N2, and 3 as they're called by science, then you would be able to contact your spirit self, your life spirit, and spirit human now. And intuition only may happen for a second, and it may inspire and it may give you the courage and impulse for the rest of your life. One inspiration, many people talk about, one moment of inspiration led them for the rest of their life, or kept them alive through horrible suffering, or gave them the strength to get through to manifest something that seems superhuman. Okay? That's what inspiration is. And imagination, this isn't the fantasies of Hollywood. These are true living images that actually build the world around us. And it sounds crazy that two-dimensional light images filled with wisdom are what create our physical world, but it's the condensation of light into sound, into the creative word. This would be warmth ether, light ether, and this is warmth ether right here, crossing into that realm. Light ether, sound ether, and life ether. And so when we're going into this, as Rudolf Steiner says, when we're asleep, we become cosmic beings. When we're asleep, we are the cosmos, he says. So that's why even our future, because we're going to evolve into angels, archangels, and archai, are available to us now, but only by going beyond time and space and consciousness and allowing that to come into the vessel of your heart, which then can, I guess, rise up to the vessel of the dodecahedron of your etheric heart behind your head. And I'd always wondered about this because when I was young and quite clairvoyant, I could see that there was two different things going on. There's something on the head, and it looks like a flower. It looks like a sunflower lying down that way. Not standing up, but lying down. But behind the head, if the person was a genius, I could tell immediately, because behind their head, right here, it's like their head extended, and it was filled with all this stuff, like morphic resonance. I could actually look into that and say, oh, you're an astronomer. And they, well, how do you know that? 'Cause I'm looking at the stars in the back of your head, coming out of the back of your head. Or, oh, you're a mathematician, or you're this, or you're that, or you're a very high spiritual developed being. Your karma and reincarnation, I believe, is written into that etheric heart, because when you look at a lama, a geshe, a rinpoche, a very highly developed clairvoyant person, and I've met many of them through my Tibetan studies, as well as in the Catholic Church, you know, Catherine Coleman and all these wonderful healers I met, they had a thing in the back of their head that I never ever could explain. Now, I think because some insights some others shared with me out of the first class lessons, as well as some insight from the human heart, which, by the way, my teacher said I should provide that to every single teacher trainer that I ever train, and I have. I've given them a copy of what I consider to be the most profound pedagogical lecture of Rudolf Steiner, the human heart. Without that, you cannot understand what it is that you're doing teaching the child. Even if you look at all of the other 24, I say 27 educational lecture series that Steiner gave, particularly educating children. So, in that human heart lecture, you actually find that the entire cosmos is written into the human heart. And that it then rises up and leaves the human being, and then we impress into that cosmos, in the human heart, all of our karma, all of our thinking, feeling, willing, all of our karma, the elements of our destiny, the elements of reincarnation. And that's why a clairvoyant could look into a person, look in their heart, look at their head, look at the back of their head, and pretty much know who they're going to talk to even before they speak. Now, I think that's what I wanted to say. Remember, the Holy Spirit works through the angelic realm. That's why these things coincide. Christ works through the archangelic realm, and the Father God works through the archai, but also the 9 hierarchy, which are inscribed here. You see the angels, archangels, and archais in the first one, the solar beings here, and the outer cosmic beings out here. Those are all in us, and we have a replica of it in us, but it doesn't mean that we can access those things. So I'm not trying to diminish the astounding power of the cosmic love of the seraphim. It is because of them and harmony, the cherubim, that planets don't collide, that the cosmos works, that things spin around in beautiful Julia sets that then create nested Mandelbrot sets that then create cosmic monadic beings, and so on and so forth. These are all the beautiful harmonic movement and wisdom and love of these beings. So it's absolutely profound, but that's going on in our body all the time. And they have already created this process that the human heart can literally become the place, that cube that can hold karma, and that they have created the ether heart, the etheric heart, which literally goes up to where the heart used to be. By the way, the heart used to work as a sense organ of warmth. And as I said, between all these stages is warmth. You only go to sleep at night because you go into warmth. And it is the warmth that one can find in one's, well, a high initiate's breath, that when they speak, it has moral force. Not only has warmth and filled with the light of wisdom, and it comes off with a tone that sounds like the harmony of the spheres, but it also is 100% correct. And that's because intuition is always correct. And so when the word, the creative word, is actually manifested right now in our age by the Maitreya Buddha and the Kalki Avatar, they speak with such moral force about the nature of Christ that it transforms people. And it is critical that you understand that Rudolf Steiner repeated this over and over again. You can only develop a relationship with Christ in the hierarchy in your wakeful state here on earth, here on this prison planet, here in this realm of delusion and illusion. You have to see through it. And this is what dreams can do. Dreams, out of these realms, these deeper realms, come the gifts of the Spirit. You may wake up and have an intuition or just be so fired with willpower that you have to go do something that has never been done before, but you know you can do it. Who's doing that? That's your higher self. That's your higher beings that you're going to grow into, coming to you with the aid of your own guardian angel and entering into you for a moment to let you know what the future is really going to be. So when you can rise up to wakefulness in sleep, when you can rise up to these beings to communicate with the language of the Spirit, when you can rise up to receive the future gifts of who you're going to be, which are already there, and I know that sounds crazy to say that, that is when truly you can be an initiate of spiritual science.